Hey, welcome to Eva Kruse. I'm so happy to welcoming you here to our 2020 Summit and talk to you and have a short interview with you. So can you just tell us a little bit about the global fashion agenda you've been working on, the impact of the global fashion agenda on the industry and also on the politicians?
Yeah, definitely. So Global Fashion Agenda is a non-profit, and we're based out of Copenhagen with an international team. And we look at the global industry, basically, and try to help or guide and mobilize the industry all across the world. We're supported by a group of what we call strategic partners, who are some of the, if not leading, then most ambitious in the space of sustainability. So, for instance, it could be Kering representing the luxury segment, or Nike representing sportswear, H&M representing high street fashion, and so on. So we have some of the biggest players behind us, and then obviously inviting the whole world in when we host our annual event, the Copenhagen Fashion Summit, which, like this one, has become a digital beast due to COVID and everything. But hopefully, during this year, it could maybe be a small hybrid, and then in 22, of course, we really hope to be able to welcome people here in Copenhagen. But what is critical, and why I think you're mentioning politicians, is that even though we see about 50% of the industry taking action on sustainability at different levels and different steps, obviously, there's still about 50% of the industry who are not moving at all. And to push them or encourage them, we believe that politicians need to help us create a level playing field with legislations, with taxes, with whatever it takes to get the industry to move in the right direction to protect people and our planet. And that's the lobby work that we do. So we have dedicated colleagues who are always in touch with particularly the EU, which is where we start most of our efforts, and then hope to make a role model case out of the EU with the Green New Deal and all of the other initiatives that are out there. And we also do that in collaboration with a couple of other organizations in something we call the Policy Hub. But I think the politicians play a pivotal role in how fast we accelerate sustainability. And just to call that out, we need to do it fast. We cannot just talk about and convene and do small steps. And, this needs really bold leadership and giant leaps. We have very little time.
So when we are talking about sustainability, we are talking about shifting values. So what do you think are the most important values, and how and what direction, where do they have to shift from and to where?
Yeah. So the year 2020, we launched the summit under the headline Redesigning Value. And I actually think that it's one of the most interesting conversations that we have inside the industry these years. And I think 2020 really fast forwarded it. We also saw a group of independent designers coming together under an initiative called Rewiring Fashion. And in essence, we're talking about how we can also create more value around the product of fashion. I think a lot of issues that we have in our industry is about overproduction. So unfortunately, it's a good business model to overproduce and then mark down your products. And all these markdowns, the Black Fridays, the constant sales that are being pushed, mainly also because of big online retailers, that actually forces brands to put even seasonal perfect goods, like in the middle of spring and summer, to mark down their products, which increases then, people's overconsumption as well. So people buy maybe two rather than one that they didn't need. And but the margin is smaller, so the revenue for the brands is smaller. And it has, forced us into a circle where we're scrutinizing our own system. And all of a sudden, fashion has become this commodity that we take, use a bit, and toss away. So the value of product needs to be lifted again. Not necessarily that everything has to be luxury price point, because I totally get that, the majority of people on this planet will never be able to afford any luxury products. So we still, of course, have to have democratic price points that are, suitable and made well, and all of that is suitable for those types of wallets. But we have come to a system where fashion has no value, where it's something that we can just dispose. and where people are constantly on the hunt for something cheaper. And I really think that this has become a big issue for our industry, and I think especially also for small designers, because they're being pressured by this push also from the bigger and more, mass market producers to constantly mark down their products. And it's a big issue for the small physical retailers who don't have that muscle and who are not present online in the same way as the big online chains. So one of the things that there has also been discussions about is, could we even shift the cadence of fashion? Why do we produce up to 52 collections a year? Why not come back to something where we're at like 2 main collections, like 2 shows instead of 5 shows, and then maybe 4 or 5 or whatever 8 drops during the year of different collections. But don't drop your pre-fall goods in April, because then your pre-fall goods will push the perfect spring-summer goods into markdowns at a time where the consumer should want to pay the full price. So I'm not talking about less profitability for brands, but about shifting the transactions. And another thing that I think is interesting is also talking about creating valuable products that can last longer with you and I, but also be resold or remade into something, buying better quality. And, I think all of that is super interesting.
It's super interesting, and I have a lot of questions in my head right now. But I mean, one of the most asked questions also is, how do we achieve this? I mean, how do we? I mean, you're also working like with big fast fashion groups, so you know the business, you know how it works. And I am living in Germany here, based in Berlin, and Germany is a super price-sensitive country. So how can we roll back or shift back and bringing more value into the products? And how can we get there?
No, I think one of the big initiatives in 2020, the Rewiring Fashion group, which was pushed also by Imran Ahmed from Business of Fashion. I think they have something, because it's also brands coming together and deciding to fight against the system that has been created. Mm-hmm. But we also need leaders in the industry, like Gucci, for instance, and they have also come out and said, hey, we're cutting, we're going to stop making 5 shows. This is also too much creatively. So we're going to just go back to 2 shows. And I think we just need bold leadership here again, and then let that be the vision. And I think that's the cool thing about fashion, is that it can influence so much, also how we think about product. The only, little, twist is that, of course, right now, after a year where shops have been closed for the majority of months, of course, a lot of brands are sitting with huge inventory and a lot of dead stock that they have to either find new smart ways of remaking or pushing to a different season if they can. But otherwise, of course, they have to mark down and to get rid of all of those goods. So that's a little bit going against that other movement. But I do think that a year like 2020 should be something that we take with us and use the crisis in a smart way. Help this moment of resetting how we think and resetting how we position fashion and how we talk about it. And if we just think short-term impact, financial achievements, we're going to miss the big opportunity we have right now for something that will be much more long-term resilience.
Really, I mean, looking at the overstock and the overproduction in 2020, it made it really, really visible. I think that was also a moment, or it can be a moment, where a lot of people and a lot of brands are starting to rethinking actually the way how they are working, how they are buying, how they're producing. And also, I mean, the topic of recycling and circularity drops in much like stronger as it was before. I think it comes in the discussion. But this was just not the point where I wanted to get to, because we were talking about the influence of fashion, and I believe that fashion is a very, very great tool to influence people, but also it is also a very influencing industry towards other consumer goods industries, but also trend-setting industry to all industries in the end. So how do you think, how can we use like the power of fashion and influencing to go for a more, or come to a more sustainable world, industry world?
Well, I think for one thing, some of the stars of our industry, of course, is also the designers, and some of the brands that other brands are following, and also has a lot of following amongst consumers. So we need them to sort of spearhead this walk in front and we can follow. I do think that the power of fashion also has a reach into pop culture, music, film, different types of celebrities, influencers, and we need to use them as well and use the power to engage them to help promote a different way of producing fashion, but also consuming fashion, and making it cool to not wear a new garment every day for your Instagram, but think smarter and show people how you use the same one in many different ways. And I'm not promoting that we should have 10 pieces of black clothes in our closet and swap those around. You know, I still appreciate creativity and product and falling in love with a piece of garment and how it makes me feel. But it has to find a more balanced place than what we've seen. I mean, over the last 15 years in Europe, we're buying 60% more clothes than we did 15 years ago. 60, and we use it less than half the time. So we've just simply come to a place where we are over consuming, and we need to halt and go back. And I do believe, I have a strong belief in people, and I do think that we have all had a lot of reflections with ourselves during COVID about what value means to us. You know, we've been at home, we've been with our families, we've been in track suits and, you know, comfy clothes, you know, and found out that it's kind of nice and that there's a lot of things we miss. Yes, for sure. But there's also a lot of things we can do without. You know, I don't really miss flying 2 or 3 times a month. You know, I miss definitely traveling, but I'm not going to want to go back to the same pace of how I was traveling before. So I think in that sense, there's many things that if we really reflect, this is the moment to change those habits and all look inside. But obviously, we also need to encourage people to understand the urgency of doing so. And one thing that I'm also really hopeful about is that during a pandemic like the one we've been through, we have been proved that each and every one of us play a role. So the actions of every individual has had an impact on how fast or not fast we are going to come out of the pandemic. And this is maybe also bringing a little bit of sense, if we think about it, to us, that every action we make, even how big a global issue we're facing, it does matter what the individual does. And the crises like the pandemic we've been through are going to be like nothing compared to what is coming ahead of us. So, you know, I think if we all sort of use that moment and say, okay, it does matter. Even if it feels like a little thing, if I separate my garbage, or if I buy a little less, or if I take the bike, or if I turn down on different things, or buy less fashion, or reuse or resell, or whatever it may be, you know, it has an impact.
Absolutely. So one last question and a short answer. It's difficult. What's your vision of a sustainable fashion industry?
Well, I mean, if we had a full circular system, we could live in abundance, right? But we don't. And I don't really see that happening. I think we will have to play on different solutions, but circularity certainly being one of them. But also I have a lot of faith in innovations, in new materials, in science that will come and help us unlock this, so we can produce less and do it smarter and reuse more of the resources that we have. And then not least, of course, secure social justice, because that part of the whole equation has not been solved yet.
Absolutely, I totally agree. So this was our time. Thank you so much, Eva, for this interview.
Pleasure.
And hopefully see you soon.